This podcast is sponsored by nobody. Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today, I will be welcoming a very talented, underrated, prolific character actor, and a poet he is, Michael David Lally. He was one of the leads in a very underrated horror film from 1981 called The Nesting. I was looking for somebody last year for the 40th on this movie, and I remember I tried to get in touch with the person who wrote it, and I couldn't find her. And then I decided to try again just a couple weeks ago, and I found Michael. Michael was also in Dracula's Last Rites. He was the voice of Sparks in Ralph Bakshi's last movie, Cool World. He was a detective in Basic Instinct. He guest starred on everything from L.A. Law to JAG to NYPD Blue. He was on a short-lived series called Behringers. And like I said, he writes poetry, and we're going to talk about all of that today. And I can't wait. It's going to be an interesting conversation. Love my journeyman character actors. You all know this. I just love journeyman actors. They got such great stories on how they got into the business. Some of them never planned on acting, and some of them did. And I just love talking to the journeyman. So yeah, here is my interview with Michael David Lally.
Hello?
Hey Michael, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm pretty good considering I'm dealing with Parkinson's.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, that's no good. Yeah, I've actually interviewed quite a few people who've had Parkinson's. That is so awful, sir. But thank you for taking the time today. This is such a great honor.
Vice versa, bro.
So, going back in time, did you gravitate toward acting early on in your childhood?
I gravitated towards performing. I started playing piano at 4 and other instruments over the years. And I love performing in school events, including plays.
Mm-hmm. So, music was your first love?
Yeah, music and poetry and performing all kind of went together.
Mm-hmm. Did you do school plays and community theater growing up?
I didn't do community theater, no.
No.
I did do a couple of school plays.
Yeah. Did you do musicals?
No, but I performed at concerts and when I was in my boyhood, and then in my teens I played piano in bars and in clubs.
Mm-hmm.
Up until my mid-20s.
Right.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask, were you into jazz music?
Yeah, that's what I played. I played a lot of what, like piano bar music, cocktail jazz.
Yeah.
That was an easy solo gig. But I had trios for many years with the bass and drums. Excuse me, and I played, I played at regular jazz clubs a little.
Yeah. Were you born and raised in New Jersey?
I was born in Orange, New Jersey, raised in South Orange, New Jersey.
Yeah.
We left when I was 18.
After high school, did you attend college?
I got a scholarship briefly to St. Bonaventure's in New York State, but I got kicked out. So I joined the Air Force as an enlisted man.
Mm-hmm.
They offered me officers training school, and I foolishly turned it down because I had a kind of streety attitude toward college kids. Didn't want anything to do with them, so I foolishly accepted lower pay grade and more harassment. I did my 4 years despite a court-martial.
Yeah. And after you got out, is that when you decided you were going to go into acting?
No, I did some acting while I was in. I did performances as piano player, but I also acted in a small movie that a musician recording artist, I can't think of his name anymore. Gary Williams, I think, might have been his name.
Okay.
But he did a small movie about Depression era gangsters and had me play Babyface Nelson.
Oh, okay.
And I did a play in Spokane, Washington while I was stationed there on Moliere play. I played The Miser. It was my first made professional stage acting.
Mm-hmm. Did you study with any... Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, did you study with any of the famous acting teachers?
Only later, in my late 30s, after when I was at the... sorry for my voice.
It's okay.
When I was at the University of Iowa,
Mm-hmm.
after 4 years in the Air Force on the GI Bill, I was in a bunch of student movies, and then the American Film Institute started, and they financed the first feature film. It was called Whitey, directed by a guy named Christopher Parker. And he had me playing a character he thought was more or less me. I was a big radical at the time, running for sheriff in Johnson County, Iowa on the Peace and Freedom ticket and giving speeches all over the Midwest on TV and live audiences. And he based the character in that movie on me, although he got me wrong. And it took a year or two for it to come out. Got minimal attention, but I got some favorable comments and reviews. And when I left there, went to Washington, D.C. to take a teaching job at a college.
Mm-hmm.
And had 2 kids and was busy with all that. And then I moved to New York in 1975 when I was 33, and that's where I got back into acting and made the decision to try and act, make some money at it.
Yeah.
I was in some poets' theater works, things like that. And then I decided to actually send my resume and headshot out and look for work. I immediately got hired to play the lead in a horror movie called Dracula's Last Rites.
Yeah. Yeah, how was that experience making that movie?
Well, I kind of freaked out. I had made a bunch of student movies.
Mm-hmm.
That feature-length film, Whitey, underground films. But this was a very rushed, independent, low-budget movie shot in South Jersey. And it was kind of a challenge. But I enjoyed the making of it. So I enjoyed the acting. I enjoyed technical aspects of it. But I was learning on the job, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, was it so low budget that you had to bring your own lunch?
Wasn't that bad. No, the director was a guy named Dominic Paris, and he had been a cinematographer previously.
Mm-hmm.
It was his first feature. And he came from Vineland, New Jersey, which is where the movie was set.
Mm-hmm.
And he got local businesses to contribute. So the movie was catered, and, we were put up in a local motel. We were treated pretty well.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, because
Yeah.
low budget movies are not known for that. I've heard so many horror stories about, not being treated so well on a low budget film, especially horror. It's a weird thing. Um, were you first assistant director on Night Kill in the remake of Tarzan?
No, that's somebody else. There was a Mike Lally
Mm-hmm.
who was an older gentleman and was already, in the business. And when I got my first Screen Actors Guild movie,
Mm-hmm.
which was The Nesting,
Right.
they said I couldn't use Michael or Mike Lally because Mike Lally was used by this old guy, and then his son, Michael E. Lally, he used Michael Lally.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to start using my middle name, Michael David Lally.
I see. Yeah.
So, I IMBD sometimes,
Yeah.
and other sources on the internet sometimes confuse those two guys, and an Irish actor known in Ireland as Mick Lally, but also in the credits as Michael Lally. All four of us are sometimes confused with each other.
Yeah, that damn IMDb. They get a lot of stuff wrong. I find it out every day. Yeah, so the Nesting, was that just a standard audition for you?
Yeah, I went in. The guy who directed that, I think his name was Armin.
Armin Weston.
Yeah, Armin Weston. He had done adult movies
Mm-hmm.
and soft porn movies before, and he said I reminded him of Montgomery Clift, which made me very happy.
Right.
Because one of the things I went for in that movie was I tried to make the character I was playing. I was involved in the women's movement and the gay rights movement, so I tried to make the character not a typical heroic figure. I tried to make him kind of soft in a way.
Mm-hmm. It's a very Stephen King-esque story, in that it deals with an agoraphobic writer, and, I love the brothel motif of dead prostitutes. It's so clever and original.
I thought so, yeah.
Yeah.
It had a couple of great people in it. Robin Gross, who plays the lead female, is, I think, pretty terrific in it. It had in the silent part is one of the dead soldiers, James, what was his name?
Oh, let me look here.
He unfortunately died of an overdose while he was doing a play on Broadway several years later, but he had a brief...
Oh, James Saxon.
James who?
James Saxon.
No, that's not it.
Oh, it's the only James I see here. John Carradine, of course, the legend, was in it. What was he like?
I gotta. If you have the time, I'm a poet. That's my main sort of profile in the world, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote a poem. I moved back to Jersey.
Yeah.
Many years, and I was actually hired by the arthritis doctors.
Oh, James Hayden, right?
James Hayden, exactly. He was a good buddy of mine. I can't believe I can remember his name.
Yeah.
He was a beautiful, beautiful cat who was in a couple of the big movies before he
Yeah.
had tragic. But so anyway, this arthritis doctors organization hired me to be the annual luncheon speaker, and the guy who hired me asked me to write a poem about arthritis, so I did.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a stanza about working with Carradine.
Mm-hmm.
So if you give me a minute, I'll read it to you.
Oh, yeah, you could read it.
The only encounters I've had with arthritis outside the above were when I made my first movie with a Hollywood star whose hands were so gnarled they looked like mushrooms grew wild under his pale skin. John Carradine played my character's grandfather and still had the force of all the roles I'd seen him play since I was a boy, as he stared at me from behind the camera while I prepared for my close-up at his supposed deathbed. And the director leaned in to whisper in my ear he'd like to see some tears on my face, then yelled, "Action." And I panicked, thinking I'm not good enough to cry on cue. But John Carradine stared into my eyes with the intensity of his. And as I looked away in search of an alternative, I saw his hands, those knuckles erupting under his skin with fierce independence, like an alternative artwork of organic confusion blossoming into fingers that extended in every direction, uncontrollably bent and stiffened and askew. And the tears flew from my eyes, much to my surprise, and the rest of the cast and crew, who after cut was shouted, erupted in spontaneous applause, but none from John Carradine, who couldn't have clapped if he'd wanted to. He just kept looking into my eyes as he nodded his head in approval and smiled slyly.
That's beautiful, Michael. That's beautiful.
So that was my experience with John. He was terrific. We hung out a lot and talked.
Yeah. I mean, he was a legend. I mean, he was in the Universal monster movies.
He was in so many great movies.
Yeah, The Grapes of Wrath, Stagecoach.
Grapes of Wrath, right?
Yeah. Oh, you could swear. Don't worry.
Oh, good. So, yeah, what was fun with him was he was pretty old. I don't know if he's as old as I am now. I'm 80 now, but he was old and he had all this arthritis and other problems. And so before, off camera, he would be pretty much just nodding off, very quiet, and then they'd say, West Armin would say action, and he would just come to life instantly. And when he'd say cut, he would kind of deflate again. But he and I talked a lot. He took me under his wing. He liked me, he thought I was good, and talked to me about his sons and what he taught them. He said, I told them they don't have to study with any acting teacher. What they have to do is read every Shakespeare play aloud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you get recognized a lot for the movie?
Who, me?
Yeah, for the nesting.
Nah, the thing I get recognized the most for is the artist witness to a murder I played on NYPD Blue.
Mm-hmm.
That was like, I don't know how many years ago, 30 years ago or something, but
Yeah.
for years and years, people would remember the guy's name, which is pretty rare for, small parts of TV shows.
It sure is, yeah. I mean, a show like that, I mean, it's overexposed. I mean, it's everywhere, it's a popular show.
Yeah, it was a treat to do it because, again, I got to play a character, portray the character differently than I think others would. I based him on, I'd lived in Manhattan on the downtown scene and been I was kind of a street poet, so I was kind of part of the whole punk scene. And I played this guy, as a kind of introverted, intellectually interesting and engaging, but almost childlike art, guy who's focused on his art, Fun role.
You were on a short...
Gloria Graham was in the nesting as well, you know.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
That was a giant thrill, meeting her. I kind of messed up, though.
Mm-hmm.
That one scene where she walks me into the bordello. It's a memory scene. Supposed to be happening in the 40s with me and Robin, our characters, projecting into the past.
Mm-hmm.
And when I took her hand before Armin yelled action and before the scene, I said it loud, or I whispered to her, what a thrill to be holding Gloria Graham's hand. She gave me a nasty look because I was fucking with her concentration.
Yeah. You were on a short-lived series called Behringers with Sam Wanamaker. I never saw that show. How was that experience?
That was great.
Mm-hmm.
That was a thrill. I'm only sorry that because of internal and studio politics,
Yeah.
They only had a fall season, not enough to put them into reruns, so nobody's ever seen it. I can't find them anywhere. I have the tapes in my archives at NYU Library, but
Mm-hmm.
nobody's digitized them. But yeah, that was a thrill. I wasn't in the pilot, but one of the producers fell in love with me in a way. I mean, he's a straight guy, but he met me at a pool party. He was like, Jesus Christ, I gotta get you in a
Yeah.
TV series. So he had me come in for a small role as a guy who ran a sweatshop
Mm-hmm.
in downtown LA, the bad guy of the series. And it was only one show, but they ended up putting me in the next show, and then they ended up putting me in every show in the series.
Mm-hmm.
Became a pretty big role. TV Guide would, everybody treated me like I was one of the stars of the show, even though I was hired after the pilot and not given the star credit. But the TV Guide wrote about the show and named me, and I think I was nominated for Best Newcomer in a magazine, the soap opera magazine that also covered what they called the nighttime folks, which they considered Berger to be. The people on the show were wonderful. Andrea Marcovici insisted to the producers that they get me my own director's chair with my name on it, which I still have that canvas back.
Nice.
So, because I wasn't being credited as a star, but everybody, she said, he obviously is part of the ensemble, so he should be treated like that. She got them, the stars and the character actors, the guest actors have two different, craft service tables.
Yeah.
Two different sets of food,
Mm-hmm.
The stars are getting the healthier food and stuff they ask for. So she got me in as part of that as well. And all of them treated me incredibly well.
That's
and,
good.
Some of my, who was the woman, the redheaded woman that
Anita Morris?
Anita Morris, she was so much fun to work with.
Yeah.
She was a trip. Well, yeah, I enjoyed the hell out of working with her. It's so much fun, and I was playing somebody who was threatening to kill her, so
yeah,
it was a lot of fun to play the bad guy.
Yeah.
One of the fun things that happened was Yvette Vermeaux, who was one of the old-time stars on the show, and was also incredibly gracious, wonderful person. Nobody on that show wasn't wonderful to work with, which is rare.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was good, but she threw us a Christmas party And we shot on a sound stage on MGM.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine that, it was such a thrill to work on one of those classic movie sound stages. And so she paid for a Christmas party, and I played the piano, and I think it was Anita Morris that had a little boy. She put on the piano stool, played Christmas songs, kind of jazzy. And Andrea Margarici sang, she was a wonderful singer. And after that show, when that show bombed or didn't make it past that first season because of political shit,
Mm-hmm.
she started a cabaret act, singing and telling stories. Because nobody on that show got hired again for quite a while. Some of them never again. Because in Hollywood, you can't be associated with a failure, and that's the way it was seen.
Yeah.
But there were some beautiful people involved. Anyway, at that Christmas party, this editor, this old guy who'd been at MGM for 40 years or something, he came up to me and said, "I just want to tell you,
Mm-hmm.
hitting this show, every time you come on the screen, I think of Marlon Brando.
Oh.
Who's my idol?" I'm like, "Holy shit, thank you, sir."
Yeah. Jeff Conaway was on the show. He's coming off.
Jeff was on the show, also a wonderful guy, but unfortunately he became kind of a drunk.
Yeah.
And they slowly cut him out because he wasn't showing up on time and things like that.
That's sad. Yeah, he was such a
But
talent.
he was a sweet guy.
Yeah.
We became buddies.
Ben Murphy from what was it, Alias Smith and Jones? He was there. Jack Scalia, Leslie Hope. Yeah, that was a great cast.
Yeah, Leslie. I thought Leslie was going to become a giant movie star. I thought of her as like Keira Knightley or somebody,
Mm-hmm.
or Curry Russell.
Yeah, she's very talented.
That type of beauty and kind of ethereal quality. The only one I think who probably did all right was Dan Aykroyd's wife. I can't think of her name.
Oh, Donna Dixon.
Yeah, Donna Dixon. Dan would show up on set a lot.
Do you remember guest starring on Hardcastle and McCormick?
I do. I played a lot of bad guys for a lot of years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a fun. I think I was a mob guy or something.
Yeah. Charlie Pickerney directed. I almost interviewed him once. What was he like to work with?
I don't have any strong memory one way or the other.
Okay. Yeah. Another legendary stuntman, Ted White, was in the episode. He played a cop. I interviewed him. He was a great guy. How about guest starring on L.A. Law?
Oh, that was wonderful, and I think it contributed to Jimmy Smits being hired to replace David Caruso on NYPD Blue.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was playing a hitman on the witness stand, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because of the way they would do a show like that, it takes place a lot in a courtroom. They shoot the stars, Jimmy Smith and what was her name? She was wonderful too. Became a friend. Shoot, why can't I think of her name?
Could it be Michelle Green or Susan Rutan?
No, what was her?
'Cause I've interviewed both of them.
Anyway, Jimmy, the way they shoot it is, they shoot the stars. They shoot from the point of view of the witness stand and the judge. And they shoot the stars. They come in early, and then they get wrapped, and they leave around 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm.
And then they turn the cameras around, and they shoot from the star's perspective, and usually an assistant director will read the star's lines for you. But I was stuck because of the angle of the camera and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Was stuck in the witness stand in such a way as I couldn't get up and move or leave. I was kind of trapped by the way the set was created. So Jimmy, Susan Day, that was the name, the other one.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Jimmy not only stuck around to do my lines with me, he stayed in costume. And he came up to me when they were changing the film and said, "You must be thirsty. You want me to get you some water?" I'm like, "No, an AD can do that." And he said, "No, I'll get it for you." The nicest guy I ever worked with. We became really dear friends. So later, when David Caruso was being replaced on NYPD Blue, the producers called around
Mm-hmm.
the people who they knew, actors, to recommend, because David was such a pain in the neck, they wanted to know the nicest actor I worked with, and I said, Jerry Schmitz. Unbelievably nice guy.
Yeah.
And Susan Day as well.
Yeah. That was a very talented cast, I think. One of the better casts of any ensemble show back then. You were in a movie written by a friend of mine, Pleasant Gaiman, called The Running Kind.
Oh, yeah, I totally forgot about that. Pleasant's a friend of yours?
Yeah, I've interviewed her a couple times. She's
Yeah, say
one of
hello, say hello.
Oh, I sure will. She's one of the funniest ladies I've ever met.
She's the best, yeah, she's one of the best. Yeah, The Running Kind, I'm always playing bad guys. I played a cheat and jive rock club owner or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Was that a good experience?
That was fun, sure, yeah.
How about making White Fang?
White Fang was great, although it was really, there was one aspect of it that was weird as fuck.
Mm-hmm.
I first of all, I felt really happy. What's Pee Wee Herman's real name? Rubens.
Trying to think.
Rubens. He wanted the role I got. Right, so I felt pretty happy that I, beat out people with more clout and cachet than me. But
Mm-hmm.
when I arrived, I was told that everybody was complaining about the German actor. Great actor.
Klaus Brandur.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
Everybody was complaining about him, and I'm thinking, well, I guess he must be a bad guy. And then I'm sitting, for makeup or something, and he comes and sits in the chair next to me, and his makeup done, and we started talking, and he seems like a totally nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
Completely pleasant, cultured, interesting. And then we start to do this scene, and I own a pit bull that's going to fight White Fang. And he's playing the guy. I don't know what he's playing, but I forget exactly who he was. But the scene, it was fantastic to make the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was a big crowd in a big open barn structure.
Mm-hmm.
It was shot on location in Alaska, and the sets were marvelous. I mean, it really looked like an old, frontier Alaska town, but it was all props and sets.
What?
But anyway, this open barn,
Mm-hmm.
it must have had 100 extras in it, sitting on the upper balconies and surrounding the round pit where the dogs fought. And they had to bring in this pit bull. Was it a pit bull that I had? I think it was a pit bull. And and the half wolf. They had three creatures that played White Fang. One was a full wolf, one was a half wolf, one was a wolf-like dog. And they were, they had different things that they could do, and so they would use them for certain scenes. So in this scene, I can't remember what it was, the half wolf, I think. But he had a fake fur attached to his neck.
Mm-hmm.
The pit bull was trained to grab and not let go. So it really looked authentic as hell.
Yeah.
But they had to be very careful because they're very rough dogs, and they have to be able to pay attention to the trainers. So the way they shot the scene is, first of all, everybody had to stand completely still while they brought in the dogs. And then the crowd had to pretend to be shouting and screaming and yelling, but it had to be done completely silently, so that only the two trainers of each of the dogs could be heard. And they'd be giving commands, and the dogs would be doing their thing. It was really just fantastic. It was so well orchestrated and worked out. But Mouse's character is supposed to come over and grab me or stick a gun in my neck or something to get me to call my dog off, because I'm going to let my dog kill White Fang, or I know I was going to jump into the pit and grab my dog away because White Fang was killing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I don't remember if I had a cane, but I was supposed to jump in and stop it, and he was supposed to stop me. And the director who had been replaced, the new director, Louis Teague, shot action, and I'm waiting for Kosky to come over, well, not Kosky, whatever his name is, to come over and stop me, and he doesn't. He doesn't move. He's way, way, way behind me. So he yells, God, and he goes and talks to him, and then he comes and says,
Right.
action again. We do it again. He does it again. Even though, and the director's saying to him, look, you're supposed to be, oh, yeah. But he's not doing it. Finally, the director comes over to me and says, Michael, can you act like you sense that he's there and respond with your line?
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't feel it was terrific because of the weirdness of that situation. And that's what turned out to be the problem on the movie, was that he saw in his mind what he wanted the movie to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And he pretended to be congenial.
Yeah.
But he just refused to physically do what was necessary to make the shot work the way the writer and the director wanted it to. And instead, with Jimmy Remar, who was on that movie, and is a great actor and a great friend.
Oh yeah, he's a great actor. He's good at playing bad guys.
Oh yeah, he's great at it. And Bill Moseley.
Oh, I've met him.
Yeah, Bill's a wonderful guy. We three were all friends and hung out together. But Remar wanted to kill Klaus. He just wanted to upside the head because he just made his job tougher,
Mm-hmm. Going back to the guy who wanted to play your part, was it Paul Rubens?
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's worked with Randall Fleischer twice. He directed Big Top Pee Wee, and Paul Rubens did the voice of the robot in Flight of the Navigator.
Oh.
Yeah. So I put two and two together when you said Rubens. I'm sure you get recognized a lot though for Basic Instinct.
No, I was in that very briefly. I was nobody, and on the when they crop the movies for TV, I'm only in one. I was in two scenes, and I'm only in one of them when they crop it on TV. I mean, you can see my hand or something.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed doing it. There's a great story with that too. One of the last scenes in the movie is when Douglas's character is putting it all together suddenly, and the way they shot it was starting in the captain's office, coming out into the bigger open office where there's a bunch of desks swinging almost in a circle, briefly looking into the hallway, and back down the other side of the office into where Douglas is cleaning on a desk. And there's all these people saying different things. I think my line is something like the code fits. It's a 30-foot long. Whatever the hell the line was. They paid me a lot of money. And I said, I remember there was a guy that flew in from Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
He had one line that scene as well. And we were talking, and we were saying, why the hell are they paying us so much money for like just one or two lines?
Mm-hmm.
And an older guy that was there said, because it's such a tricky shot, if it isn't done perfectly, they're going to spend days shooting it. It's going to cost all kinds of money. And that was true. The director, I can't think of his name.
Oh, Paul Verhoeven.
Yeah, Paul Verhoeven. He called everybody on set at the beginning of the day. Craft service, grips, everybody. And everybody come out. I think it was outside so we could all fit. And he described the scene, said how technically difficult it was going to be. But he wanted everybody to know what was happening and pay attention so that they could get through it.
Mm-hmm.
With only a few takes. So everybody was aware. And the good news for me and my fellow actors was we did do it in a few takes and none of the actors fucked up. It was technical fuck-ups that made them have to reshoot. The other thing interesting about that movie was that when I went in the audition for it, I knew I was going to get it because I'm taller than Douglas and
Sharon Stone.
For those reasons, I was pretty sure I wasn't going to get the guy, the heavyset actor that played his partner.
Oh, George DeZunza?
Yeah, that's what I went in for.
Yeah.
And I didn't get it, and they called me back in. And Verhoeven shot. He had a handheld movie camera on his shoulder, and he would speak from behind there and shoot the entire audition. I never did it with everybody. That's what he did with me.
Yeah.
And the third time I came in, I said to him after the audition, or maybe the second time, I said, look, you and I both know I'm not going to get that role as a partner. And it hadn't been announced yet that Douglas was doing the lead, but it was rumored. And he said, well, what role do you want? And I said, are you kidding me? I want the lead.
Yeah.
I'd be perfect in the lead. And he said, okay, prepare a scene. So I came in the next time, I did a scene, and that was that. Of course, I didn't get it. Then I get called in to do this little bit part. So I took it for the money. And And it actually turned out to be more money because they were supposed to shoot it in San Francisco, but people came out, gay activists came out and blew whistles because they had heard that the movie was going to make Sharon Stone lesbian character look bad. And so they had to rebuild the whole San Francisco scene in the studio in L.A., and they had to hold off on shooting. And they called me and said, I had just 2 days shooting. They called me and said, I want to hold you for a week and a half, but pay you for 2 days. I'm like, no. You hold me for a week and a half, I can't do any other job. You got to pay me. So that paid my health insurance for years. But anyway, the point I was going to make was, after the movie came out, Sharon was a good buddy of mine. I've known her since before she's in movies.
Yeah.
Still do. We're still close touch.
That's good.
And she, I went and saw it at a screening that she arranged. And I was like, Douglas is doing me, and everybody makes fun of me for being egotistic and saying things like that. But then years later, there was some sort of tribute to Michael Douglas. And they had this, one of the scenes from, a couple of scenes from Basic Instinct, including the beach scene. And I got about 3 calls from people in Hollywood saying, I didn't realize that Michael Douglas was kind of doing you.
Yeah. How did you get to be the voice of Sparks in Ralph Bakshi's Cool World?
Well, when I first moved to Hollywood, my second wife, Penny Milford, who had a lot of, cachet at that time in Hollywood, with my 2 kids from my previous marriage. His mother was in a coma at the time, and we were sitting at dinner table in Santa Monica, in this house we were renting, and the phone rings. This is like 1982. And a voice on the other end says something like, I was born in Brooklyn in 1942. Who discovered rock and roll first? Me or you? I said, who the fuck is this? He says, my name's Ralph Bakshi. I make movies. I came out to Hollywood to make my first live feature and lost my soul. But I just read your book. I had a book of poems that had just come out called Hollywood Magic. He said, I just read your book. I think you can help me get my soul back. So he asked me to come meet him at Paramount in a screening room. I went, and he had set up a screening of, what's her name? Great
Kim Basinger.
No, a great avant-garde filmmaker,
Ralph
Clark. Something Clark. Anyway, she made a movie called Cool World.
Yeah.
The Cool World. That's one of the most brilliant movies. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. And he had arranged a screening of it because I had mentioned the movie. And it was one of his favorites, so it was kind of impressive. Because that was a hard movie to get. So he said, I want you to write a movie for me. So he hired me to write a movie because I also wrote screenplays because, sometimes the acting wasn't paying off. I had these 2 kids of my own that I was raising. Anyway, that's how I got to know Bakshi. We tried to make this movie without Ruddy, but never got made. Movie about a motorcycle guy that I wrote with him. But in the process, we became buddies. So Bakshi and I used to hang out. He introduced me to Hubert Selby Jr., who became my closest friend in L.A. And so when he was making Cool World, he called me and asked me to come in. I felt like Sparks was based a little bit on me. You know, he had a kind of white hair,
Mm-hmm.
kind of sticking up, and was very jazzy. In fact, I did some riffs that were from Miles Davis albums for the character when he's walking along, you know, going Scooby Dooby da that kind of shit.
Yeah.
And I had to go back in and do it again because they couldn't get. They had to, you know, they were afraid they'd get sued. So I had to invent my own melodies, which I didn't get the extra money for.
Mm-hmm.
But it was fun. The most fun thing was when I saw the movie, having guys leaving the theater voting Sparks instead of, you know, Gabriel Byrne.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, with the line, there's a line about French fries or something like that they would quote. I can't remember what it was, but it was me going, you know, give the other French fries, motherfucker, or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it, but yeah, that ended up being Bakshi's last theatrical film because, you know, Hollywood was changing. You know, his style was, you know, his style was old fashioned, and it was the first time that he directly dealt with, you know, a big studio like Paramount.
Yeah. I think he went back east for a while after that.
Yeah, I know a guy who's interviewed him on his show a couple times. I can't even get through to him, but yeah, it's Shirley Clark who made The Cool World, by the way.
Shirley Clark, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Shirley Clark, if you can get it, you have to go to UCLA.
Yeah.
To get a copy of it and sit there and watch it in a room.
It's one of those, yeah.
It doesn't seem available online, or at least not the last time I looked, which is a few years ago.
It's one of those rare movies.
It's worth watching, man. It's a hell of a movie.
It's one of those rare movies for sure. Did you get to work in the same recording booth as Candy Milo?
Candy Milo? No.
Okay, she's a friend of mine. I've interviewed her.
I worked with the guy that did the voice, did a couple of the male voices, the hero and the professor. He was a young guy, and he was a brilliant, oh man, what a brilliant voiceover guy.
I'm guessing it's either Joey Kamen or Maurice LaMarche.
Might be Joey, I can't quite remember.
Yeah, he just came out with a memoir, I heard. You did a couple episodes of Jag. How was that?
That was a pisser. I like working on that.
Mm-hmm.
That was quite fun. I got to play a detective, you know, one of the few good guys I played. And on location shooting, I think in Pasadena, as well as up in the high desert at an empty sound stage where we shot a scene where it was a fun character because in the first episode I was on, he's just a good, tough detective.
Mm-hmm.
Had some good scenes. Good scenes with a couple of good actors, like, what was his name? A little red-haired Irish-American actor.
Oh,
What the hell is his name? Anyway,
mm-hmm.
I like working with everybody, but the woman, what was her name? Catherine Bell?
Catherine Bell, yeah.
She was one of the best troopers, but I kind of blew it because we were doing this scene in the second episode I was on. I turned into a bad guy and I abducted her. And we're doing a scene where I have her tied up and I'm pouring booze down her throat or something. I don't know what I'm going to do. And it was,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it was early in the morning in the high desert in this vast, empty
Mm-hmm.
sound stage. And it was freezing. And it was not fun. It was the least fun part of the shoot. And this producer was standing next to the camera. And they'd shoot it, and he'd whisper into the director's ear and the camera, and we were doing it over and over. And the producer finally said something like, "It's rad that it's taken so many takes," and I lost it. And said, "Well, maybe if you got the fuck out so we could do the work, leave us alone." Which I'm sure other actors wanted to say, but that's why I didn't have a great career, because I did things like that. But Catherine was wonderful. She was wet, with this big booze house going on her, and shivering, and never once complained.
That's
and
good.
A very, very sweet person.
So how long have you been into poetry?
Since I was a little boy. But my first small book was in 1970, and my first publications were in the early 60s, and I've had 30 books come out and so on, so been around.
So you've always written poetry books and always kept a diary for them?
Well, I've kept journals, but I pretty much wrote directly on the typewriter and then the computer. But some I wrote by hand.
Yeah, you even had your own documentary called Michael Lally, I Wanted to Call It Poems. How did that come about?
Yeah, that hasn't been released yet, and I haven't seen any final product. There was a woman who was, because of my health problems, I couldn't go into New York to events and things without help. So I met a young woman who was a fan of my poetry, and she wanted to be mentored in poetry and writing and so on, her creativity. Named Rachel E. Dyken, and we made a deal where she would help me with stuff that I was having problems with, and I would, share all my knowledge and connections with her. So it started off as poetry. And we'd take a train in and out from New Jersey into New York and back. And she'd ask me about things, and I'd give a mini lecture. And one time she said, "I should be filming this and making a documentary." And I said, "Why don't you?" So she got serious about it and bought a more regular camera, and instead of just doing an on-the-fly documentary, which I was had in mind, she started doing a more formal thing and trying to raise money. And so she got involved in producing and directing and, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And raising money and all. And she moved to LA, and I really haven't heard much about it since. She hasn't been able to, as far as I understand, do a final edit.
Well, I hope it gets released. I mean, it sounds like it's going to be a great one.
Who knows? You can see a tiny bit of it online as a kind of trailer she made.
I'll check it out. So how's the COVID situation been for you?
Well, it's not too bad because I was already having health problems and pretty much living on my own. My youngest boy is 24, and he lives in Manhattan, but he would come over once a week and shop for me and so on. So I was pretty protected from it, and being content. I'm kind of retired as an actor. Well, not kind of. I am retired as an actor and a screenwriter. So I'm basically, I write his poetry and prose memoirs and stuff. And so being home alone is ideal for me. I don't mind it at all. And I watch a lot of old movies on TV, and I love that TCM is moving forward and what they consider classics. So that now there's movies that being shown that I have friends of mine in.
Mm-hmm. That's good though. I mean, at least you're making the best of everything, and you're remaining positive. How? So, what year did you leave L.A.?
I was in LA from 1982 to 1999.
17 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last thing I did, the last on-camera acting job, I'm pretty sure, I think anyway, was the last episode of the first season of Deadwood.
Yeah, that's a great show.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention Jackie Giroux says hi.
Jackie Giroux.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Name from the past.
Yeah. I interviewed her back in January. She is so fun and so funny. And yeah, when I advertised I was going to be talking to you, she's like, "Oh, tell Michael I said hi. It's been a long time." And I actually connected her with somebody that she worked with back in the 70s that she hadn't seen in like 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah, she's on Facebook. Well, Michael, I want to thank you so much for coming on today, and I'm so glad that you have this positive attitude, and that you're getting through things, because it's an insane time. I don't know how anyone could remain positive, but you sure are, and I wish nothing but the best for you.
Well, thanks, brother, and I appreciate that you're paying attention to people that often get overlooked.
Yes, it's quite a blessing to me. Well, you have yourself a great day, and please be safe.
Yeah, and as Hubert Toby Jr. used to say to me all the time, let's give a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, there you have it. Michael David Lally. Ain't he a cool dude? What a nice guy, huh? I feel so bad for what he's going through health-wise, but he's remaining positive, and that's what's keeping his spirits afloat, and I have nothing but the utmost respect for that. So I'm so glad that that's going on, at least in this terrible chapter of his life. And I hope that documentary gets released. I really, really do. I'm going to go check out the trailer, and I encourage all of you to do the same. Well, until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying there's no shame in living in the past, because the present sucks. Later, dudes.